if the farmer is fully compliant on the 2 mandatory actions and fully compliant on the chosen optional action, then they'll get up to their €13 per euro. So choose 2 of the first 3 mandatory actions, that's the €8, and then if they want to do the optional action, 1 of either foot bathing or plunge dipping gear on.
Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode we'll bring latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. Now, in this episode we're joined by David Buckley from the Department of Agriculture to discuss the 2025 National Sheep Welfare Scheme and the Sheep Improvement Scheme. David starts by outlining some of the key elements of the welfare scheme, including the eligible tasks, the increased payment rates and the compliance requirements. We also covered the application process, key dates and record keeping obligations. The conversation then shifts to the Sheep Improvement Scheme, now in its 3rd year, as we explore some of the key tasks involved and opportunities available for new entrants to join this year. We finish up with a look at the 2025 payment schedule. First though, we'll hear from David.
If we talk about the 2025 National Sheep Welfare Scheme, so it follows on from the National Sheep Welfare Scheme that obviously came in 2024. So last year was the first time that we had a National Sheep Scheme. So just maybe very briefly, so that scheme in 2024 paid €8 per euro, and to date we've paid out just over 15.2 million to over 16,300 participants in that scheme. So looking at the 2025 scheme, so the 2025 National Sheep Welfare Scheme, so there's budget 22 million, and it'll allow for payment of up to the €13 per euro, where a farmer does the 2 mandatory actions and 1 of the optional or the voluntary actions. So for the actions, the shearing, the body condition scoring, the vaccination of the ewes or the lambs, and the plunge dipping, so they're the same as they were in 2024, with 1 new additional action in 2025 being the foot bathing. Now, the order of the actions in 2025 is slightly different than it would have been in 2024. So in 2025, the farmer must choose then 2 mandatory actions from a choice of 3, which are the shearing, the body condition scoring of ewes, or the clostridial vaccination of the ewes or lambs. So each of these actions is paid at €4 each. So if all the farmer wants to do is to do the 2 mandatory actions, that's fine, no issue whatsoever. And assuming he or she is fully compliant, they'll receive it then up to the €8 per euro. If, however, the farmer wants to avail of the higher payment of the additional €5 per euro, so to bring them up to the €13 per euro, then he or she must select 1 of the following 2 actions. So either the foot bathing or the plunge dipping. And each of these actions are paid at €5 each. So if the farmer is fully compliant on his or her the 2 mandatory actions and fully compliant on the chosen optional action, then they'll get up to their €13 per euro. So just to recap, so they choose 2 of the first 3 mandatory actions, that's the €8, and then if they want to do the optional action, 1 of either foot bathing or plunge dipping gear on.
I know how David outlined all these tasks, including the first one where it's clostridial in the category A's. All that task has to be completed within 2025, within that time frame you indicated, by the 17th of October.
Yeah, so the 17th of October. So the 17th of October is the completion date for all of these actions. And the primary reason that is the cut-off date, if we call it the 17th of October, is ultimately we want to make payments under this scheme from approximately the middle of November onward. So we need a period of time knowing that farmers have completed the actions. Now, if, as we had last year, we had a number of requests for people to choose a later action, maybe if they're on hill flocks, there is a later completion date of the 28th of November. So differently this year, if a farmer wants to go for that later action, they must select that now when they're applying for the scheme. And I'll go through the details of applying for the scheme in a few moments, but they must select it at that time. And then the second thing is, if they are choosing that later date of the 28th of November, that will mean their entire payment would not be made until January of 2026.
Okay, so that's definitely something that needs to be considered carefully. You mentioned the application process, David. Maybe take me through that and some of the key dates involved in it.
Yeah, okay. So Kieran, so the first thing, look, like a lot of department schemes at this point, so all the applications are online, and the farmer is free to apply them. They can apply themselves, no issue whatsoever. Or if they wish to utilise maybe the services of a FOSS approved advisor or their own advisor, no issue in that regard either. So the online process is very straightforward, and the farmer or their FAS advisor, so they'll be presented with the scheme payable number, which will be the average of the 3 census returns of the breeding ewes for the period 2022 to 2024 inclusive. So where the 2024 census return for the breeding ewes is higher than that 3-year average, then the farmer or the FOS advisor can simply overwrite the average that we're presenting with, and they can increase it up to that number if that's what they so wish to do. However, and I'll go through an example in a moment, but however, whatever number they're putting in as their payable number, that's the number they're committing to carry out their actions on. So just to choose wisely, if I'll put it that way. So maybe just to give an example. So say my 2022 number, say I had 100 breeding ewes down in my census, 23 I had 100 down again, and in 2024, say I had 121 down as my breeding ewe number, my 2024 census. So the average of those would actually be 107, and we would present the farmer or the advisor there with 107. However, because the farmer on their census as of the 31st of December 2024 said that 121, the farmer or the advisor, they can simply scratch out the 107 and put in up to 121 if that's what they so wish to do. But once again, just be mindful, that's the number they're saying they're going to carry out the actions on. So if they know, for argument's sake, they're only going to have 107 during 2025 under this scheme, and that's all they're going to carry out their actions on, whatever their actions are, then they should put in 107, not be thinking, well, I'm going to get paid for 121. Then I suppose the other thing just to note is, where only 2 returns were submitted, so say the farmer only got into sheep, didn't have a census in 2022, only got into sheep in 23, then the average will simply be divided by the 2023 and the 2024 census number. Once they've entered or accepted then the scheme payable number, so they've put in their number, whatever that might well be, they'll have to take a number of declarations just to say that the normal stuff they confirm with the terms and conditions. Reminder, they'll have to select their 2 mandatory actions, and that's all they want to do, that's fine. But if they want to go for the extra €5 to select that optional action, and then just ensure that they press the submit button. And then lastly, here I might touch on it later on too, but just an important point is, as was the case in the 2024 National Sheep Welfare Scheme, to be eligible for the scheme, you must, so for this 2025 scheme, you must have a 2024 census in, and the date for that is you had to have it in by the 28th of February of 2025. That would traditionally have been the 14th of February, but with the Storm Owen and that, and the impact on broadband and power for people, we extended that date to the 28th of February.
And David, the key point of this is, unlike the Sheep Improvement Scheme, you have to apply for this year. It's not a rollover scheme.
This is not a rollover scheme from the 2024 National Sheep Welfare Scheme, and it's a completely separate application process. So no issue with a farmer being in both the Sheep Improvement Scheme and in this 2025 National Sheep Welfare Scheme. But it's absolutely, Kieran, a very good point. It's not a rollover from the 2024 scheme if you were in that one. And even if you weren't in that one and you want to come into this one, it's a completely separate application process to the Sheep Improvement Scheme. So that's the important point. And we definitely would have had a handful of farmers last year who probably understood that they were in the scheme. Sure, it's a sheep scheme, but it's not, 2 separate schemes altogether.
Just in terms of numbers that have already gone in, David, and where you're sitting at the moment.
Yeah, okay. So the scheme is a budget of 22 million, Kieran, right? So it opened on the 31st of March, and it'll close then without lay penalties on the 15th of May 2025. So the closing day is the 15th of May, the same as your normal BIS or as a BPS as it would have been before. But it'll still remain open then for 25 calendar days after that, up to the 9th of June. But at that stage, you're into late applications penalty percentage. So basically, if you're minded to apply for the scheme, you need to make sure you get in by the 15th of May. So looking at the numbers then, so up to just this morning, the 14th of April, so we've received just short of 2,400 odd applications, and the smallest payable number that's applied as 5 euros, and the largest is just over 1,000 euros. But probably the important point, or just a stat for people to be mindful of, is while you can apply for only the 2 mandatory action, the €8 if that's all you want, the reality is 97% of farmers are applying for the €13, i.e. they're doing the additional voluntary optional action, either the plunge dipping or the foot bathing. And then when you look at in the mandatory actions, shearing and vaccination are the most popular there. And actually, when you look at the optional or voluntary actions, the split between foot bathing and plunge dipping thus far is relatively 50-50, or there's very little between them, Kieran.
Okay, that's interesting. Look, so we basically a month to go, and again, like any of these things, don't leave it to the last minute to apply for them. In terms of schemes, so you've outlined what the key tasks are. Most should be familiar with them from last year. David, in terms of what we need to keep in terms of records for it, what's the important things there?
Yeah, okay. So within the 2025 National Sheep Welfare Scheme, so while it'll stay open up to the 15th of May, and the farmer will come in and choose their actions. So whether that be two mandatory and plus their optional or their voluntary action. So as we touched on earlier, the completion date is the 17th of October 2025, albeit you can choose that later date of 28th of November if that's what you're so minded to do. But once you choose your actions, we'll supply you with your scheme action record sheets. They'll be appended to the terms and conditions, and they'll be available up on gov.ie as well. So once you choose your actions, you need to ensure, first of all, that you carry them out in accordance with the time frame that's set out in the terms and conditions. So as we said there a few moments ago, if we go back to the foot bathing for a minute, so you must clearly ensure that you carry out in that case, your 2 foot bathing events between the 1st of April and the 1st of October. Ensure you accurately record that within the action record sheets for your payable number. So if your payable number was 100 Joes, for argument's sake, then you must be indicating that you've foot bathed at least that 100 Joes. You must ensure that the dates that you enter in there are correct, that whatever product you use, that you use it in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations, and that you retain a copy of that invoice, and that you can provide that to us in the event that we look for that. And I suppose the other thing just to be mindful of, Kieran, too, is that and we're all creatures of habit. After when we get a letter, if we do something there and then, we'll do it there and then. But if we forget about it, it could go down the pecking order. So if we write out to you looking for whatever correspondence it might be, scheme action record sheets, whatever, just to get it back into us, because for as long as we're waiting for a reply, you're not going to be getting lined up for payment. So just to be mindful of that, Kieran.
No, important to keep on top of them kind of things. So David, just finally, what's the eligibility criteria for those applying for the 2025 National Sheep Welfare Scheme? Just a quick reminder for the listeners.
Yeah, okay, so there's a couple of important things there just to be mindful of. So first of all, to be eligible to apply for the 2025 National Sheep Welfare Scheme, as we mentioned earlier, you must have submitted a 2024 census with breeding ewes on it by the 28th of February 2025. So we've touched on that, and that's fairly clear. Then you must ensure that you submit a 2025 your BIS, your normal single payment or area aid form by the 15th of May 2025. So just make sure that people get that in, and then you must have an Ovine active DAF and herd number. That won't be an issue, obviously. But what that does mean is that if, for I would say myself, Dave Buckley, if I only got into sheep since the 1st of January 2025, I'm not going to be eligible for the 2025 National Sheep Welfare Scheme. And this was the exact same as it was in the National Sheep Welfare Scheme in 2024, whereby if back then, if I'd only got into sheep since the 1st of January 2024, I wasn't eligible to apply either. So it's just to be mindful of that. And in particular, it's to be mindful of, because we can all forget about it, but just to make sure that you get your BPS or your area aid form in by the 15th of May.
Okay, Dave, so that's the National Sheep Welfare Scheme, fairly well covered. If we move on to the Sheep Improvement Scheme, just maybe a quick reminder of what all's in that and some of the key things you need to be aware of.
Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, so if we move on to the Sheep Improvement Scheme, and once again, just to emphasize, so completely separate scheme. So this is a scheme where you're in a contract, and as we touched on earlier on, Kieran, it just simply rolls over from 1 year to the next unless you write into us for whatever reason to say you want to get out. So if we look at the Sheep Improvement Scheme for year 3, so that opened for new entrants on the 25th of March just gone by, and it'll remain open until the 29th of April. So that is a good bit earlier than the 15th of May. But even after the 29th of April, then you have 25 days late to apply. But if you fulfill the criteria, and your mind's to apply, just make sure to get in by the 29th of April. And the reason the time frame is a good bit shorter is because we literally only expect maybe a couple of hundred, maybe a few hundred to apply, the same as we would have had in year 2. And I suppose then within the new entrant category, so you must have had a 2024 census in by the 28th of February 2025. So exact same as you just spoke about there for the National Sheep Welfare Scheme, with breeding ewes on it to be eligible to apply for CIS year 3. Once again, it's an online application process, relatively straightforward. You can do it yourself as the farmer if that's what you so wish, or you can get your advisor to do it. And the same again, you're going to be presented with your breeding ewe numbers for the census returns to 22 to 24, and then we'll give you the average of it. no different than in National Sheep Welfare Scheme. And the same for the CIS here. If we present you with your average and say, for argument's sake, it's 100 Kieran, in my case, maybe, like I'm free to choose any number lower than that. That's what I so wish to do. If I know that I'm only going to, maybe I'm downsizing a bit from 100 to 80 euros or whatever it is, then no issue whatsoever in doing that. So for CIS scheme year 3, everybody else that's been in this game for year 2 and year 1, they just automatically roll over to 3. All the actions are the exact same in CIS as they have been for the last 2 years. But probably one important point, maybe just to emphasise, is, and something for farmers to be mindful of, and just to go back and to check their own records, the year that they put down that they were going to do the genotype RAM action, important here, if I'm coming into this game and I have less than 150 euros, then I only have to do it once. But if I've over 150 euros, I must do it twice. And at the time of applying, if I was in for the last 2 years, I indicated the years I was going to do that action. If it less than 150, it was only 1 year, but if it more than 150 euros, I had to do it twice. We have no issue with a farmer, say for argument's sake, I said, well, I was going to do it in 26 for argument's sake. No issue with a farmer saying, geez, it suits me better to do it now in 25. Contact us. We've no issue with updating that. But what we want, well, we're not allowing a farmer to kick it out by a year, purely and simply being that obviously the RAM is going to bring progress. This is a sheep improvements game, so we want people to do it on time. If they want to do it a little bit earlier, no issue whatsoever.
Just notify yourselves, and that's one of the tasks probably that has caused a wee bit of more confusion.
Yeah, absolutely. It has definitely caused a wee bit of confusion, and I suppose the other thing to be very mindful of, particularly now as we, ultimately this game started in 23, we had 24, and now we're into 25. Where a farmer doesn't carry out this action, and it, unfortunately, like a lot of things in life, it's set out there in the terms and conditions, but where they don't carry it out, after a period of time, we will have to start removing farmers from the scheme if they haven't carried this out. So just to be really, and that will only kick in really now from 2025 onwards. So if they haven't carried it out, they could ultimately end up being removed from the scheme. So just to maybe go back, pull out your record, see what year you were to do it or were meant to do it, and ensure you carry it out on time, please.
No harm to refresh your memory, and you've already touched on as well for the reference number. Again, everybody really should go back and check what the reference number is for that scheme, and if it needs to be amended, definitely get on to yourselves. Maybe, David, just finally, like the balancing payments for year 2, when do they appear?
Yeah, okay, so for year 2, so we made the advance payments to farmers there. They commenced back in November 2024, so at a rate of 85%. So we intend to start the balancing payment, which will be the 15% from approximately the middle of May onwards, so a little over 4 to 5 weeks away. If we have, just reiterate one other point, if we've sent you some query or correspondence, or we ask you to submit your action record sheets, make sure you do return and reply that as soon as possible. We would have written to a good cohort of farmers back in the start of February, maybe 500 or 600 farmers looking for the action record sheets to be submitted. And if you are in that cohort and you've sent them in, we'll process them with the intention of getting you into the balance and pay run. But if we wrote to you and you haven't replied to us, you need to get that in as quickly as you possibly can. And then maybe just to move on a little bit further, Kieran, so the advance payments then for year 3 for CIS for 2025, so we'd expect them later in November 2025. And then just to go back to National Sheep Welfare Scheme for a minute, the intention would be to start the scheme payments for those around the middle of November, approximately the middle of November 2025. And then maybe just the only other thing, the same as in National Sheep Welfare, same in Sheep Improvement Scheme, just as the saying goes, the proof is in the pudding. So if you have it's your action record sheets, your action record booklets, make sure you're completing them as you're going along, completing the action, and make sure you're mindful of the dates you're doing them, the numbers you're doing them on, that you hold on to the receipts, whether it's a receipt from the National Sheep Welfare Scheme for a fella that maybe you're getting into shearing or plunge dip, or in the Sheep Improvement Scheme, whatever the particular action might be, just to retain them. And look, if you have any questions, if people have any questions or Kieran's questions or queries, Kieran, on anything, they can give us a call here in Direct Payments here in Portlaoise on 057 867 4422. So 057 867 4422. Or if they're on email, they can send us an email to sheepschemes at agriculture.gov.ie, and we'll get back to them as quickly as we possibly can with an answer to their query.
David, I think that's really useful. I'll include that in the show notes along with the terms and conditions of the Sheep Welfare Scheme. Look, really appreciate you coming on today. That's a great update to get, and it's some a very important task for farmers to complete now over the next couple of weeks. David, thanks again.
You're very welcome, Kieran. Any time and any if we can be of any help to people, more than happy to do that.
We'll leave it there for this episode. You'll find a link in the show notes to the webpage for both for the 2025 National Sheep Welfare Scheme and the Sheep Improvement Scheme. We'll find the whole terms and conditions, frequently asked questions and contact details for David's department should you have any queries about either scheme. That's it for me. For updates on our sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us wherever you get your podcasts.